Hello, I'm George English, the Director of Research Through People. There's no escaping the fact that nostalgia is fueling an insatiable appetite for ancestry research. Whilst you're at home, you may be spending more time on social media and starting to build your family tree. Events like Remembrance Day get us thinking about our ancestors in the past. Do your ancestors hail from England? If so, this is the ideal opportunity to understand English heritage and maybe with a little help, start the journey to walk in the footsteps of your forebears. English genealogy is one of our specialities, and we've brought our own ancestors to life using family tree ancestry and coordinated place visits, including family reunions in London and other family locations. And London's a fascinating place. If we go back to the more than 1,000 years, in fact, of history, various things, the Great Fire of London, various things stick in our minds, St Paul's and so forth. But let's move forward, London in the 19th century, and here's an old picture of the Thames and the various buildings beside it. Now, what was staggering in the 19th century was the population went from 1 million in 1800 to 7 million in 1900 to become the world's largest city. It was the capital of the British Empire, global political, financial and trading capital. The 1850, Britain had led the world in the Industrial Revolution, and in 1850 had more than 40% of the total world's industrial capacity. So millions flocked to London. But at the same time, the downside was poverty. Millions lived in overcrowded and slums, particularly in the East End of London. The Metropolitan Police was started there. The railways transformed the country and what have you. And our ancestors lived through these times, experienced them in various ways. They may have been rich, well-to-do people involved in running things, or they may have been some of the poorer people living in these slums. So here's a map of London at the end of the 19th century, and just to give you a rough idea, the interesting thing is the city of London is what we've known as London, and it's only at the end of the 19th century when they changed the boundaries. Before then, the home counties like Essex and Middlesex and Kent went right up to the city of London. The Houses of Parliament, the Thames, of course, is such a prominent feature of London with trade and what have you. The House of Parliament is a bit to the west of the city of London. The King and Queen live in Buckingham Palace, of course, which is further over here to Hyde Park. There are so many places here you could see in this thing. The railway stations, the King's Cross, Euston for railways going north, Waterloo going south and so forth. So this is the place where, if you had ancestors from London, that they lived, experiencing all sorts of things, etc. So what we're going to do here is use family history in the archives, and of course the key thing is the national archives for the whole country are based in London. 1,000 years of records of all sorts of things, and we may well refer to those records in dealing with this. And so what we're going to do, my own family came from London, but when we say came from, the Industrial Revolution had a tremendous effect on the country. And just to show you what can happen, here are where our ancestors migrated from to get to London. And we find that actually there in 1760 someone came from Cumberland. Typically they came from the home counties to go to London, just as in Manchester or Birmingham, those sort of places, Leeds, Bradford. Most people would come from the areas not too far from there. But we had people come from various places. You can see the sort of building here, early 1800s in particular, someone from Yorkshire there. And they came, and of course the East End of London, they're known as Cockneys. And here are where our Cockney great-grandparents lived. Now, you may know a Cockney is someone born within the sound of Bow Bells. So here in the red thing, Hackney, Bethnal Green, Shoreditch, Southwark, within Bow Bells. It depends which way the wind's blowing, exactly where you can hear the Bow Bells. And of course, there's a Cockney language, rhyming slang. So here, for example, what colour of barnet have you got under your titfer? What does that mean? Well, barnet rhymes with barnet fair, hair, and titfer, expression tit for tat, tat, hat. So what colour of barnet means what colour of hair have you got under your hat, as simple as that. So these are the sort of characters who existed in the past. When I say so many people came from outside, in fact, there are not that many people who have been Cockneys for generations back and through the centuries, but lots of people have lived there, of course, in recent times. So what I'm going to do is take our own family, our Lough family. Now, one of the key things that families used to keep was a family Bible. Now, we started research and we found that Joseph Lough, who was born 1801, married 1820, that they had 8 children and 3 of those died young. But then eventually we found, and we asked through various people, a will that said that Joseph Lough left his Bible to his son Alfred. And we traced down through Alfred's eldest son, and we'd made contact with a cousin, Sonia Bedingfield, and she was the daughter of who would have been the eldest son. So we said, have you ever heard of Joseph Lough's family Bible? She said, yes, my brother Jem's got it. And so we got hold of this family Bible, and there in neat handwriting, Joseph had recorded both of his marriage to Mary Ann in 1820 in St Leonard's Church in Shoreditch, and then all of his children. And sadly, would you believe, they didn't just have 8 children, they had 13 children. 7 of those died before the age of 1, another got TB, so we found out that in fact 8 of their 13 children had died. Now, one of the things we've done is to research various things, court records. So we found in 1829 in the Old Bailey, pickpocketing. These 2 people had been had up for pickpocketing, and James Wright said he was a friend of the Loughs, and he took baby Eliza Lough into the street in her pram, and she had a necklace on, not a very valuable one. I look in the shop, the prisoners had all pushed up against me when I stopped the shop, and they took the necklace. And here William Dickinson saying, the boys were the child and the beads were hanging off. I went to take to them. I never saw Haycock, the other boy, beforehand. He put a written defence. Now, interesting enough, what was the punishment? They were found guilty, whipped and discharged. Justice was different in those days. But here are the 5 of Joseph Lough's children who survived. And one way or another, we've managed to find photos of all 5 of them. And interesting enough, Mary Ann, the eldest daughter, and Lucy married 2 brothers called Dobson. And they and brother Edwin Henry all went out to New Zealand in the 1850s. And we knew nothing about this New Zealand connection until a few years ago. We established it, and we find actually over half of the Lough descendants we know of actually descend from those who went out to New Zealand. And you can see here the dates of the various people who they married and how many children they had. So Joseph Lough had 5 children who survived. His children had 42 children between them, over half born in New Zealand. Joseph would never have seen them or met them, and only 2 of those died young. Very tough out in New Zealand in the early days, but a healthy environment. And 2 of the Loughs married, Shepherd and Sarah Green. Now here are photos of the way Shoreditch was back then in the late 1800s. And again, that's something that helps to bring our understanding of our ancestors to life and the life they live with. And so we've had family reunions since then. Here we are at St Leonard's Church in Shoreditch, where Joseph and Mary Ann Lough had married in 1820. And you've heard of House Through Time, one of the television programs. One of Joseph's brothers had a ham dealers on Brick Lane, and in fact his mother spent her last few years there. So this family home is over 200 years old. What is it now? It's no longer a home, it's actually an Indian restaurant. And here we are, the family actually went back and had dinner at their old restaurant, and here they are enjoying it. So that's really how a family can be brought to life by this. So I hope you found that interesting, particularly if you're from London. If so, please feel free to get in touch. Now we're nearing Christmas. One of the things you may want to do is, rather than you yourself get your family research, give it to someone else, your husband, wife, partner, parents, or what have you. What do we give our parents, etc. Very happy to help you. So please get in touch. We look forward to hearing from you and to bringing your ancestors to life.